So you've decided to ditch Unity because how can you work with a company that is just so untrustworthy? But where do you go now? What are your options? Well, there's plenty of game engine options out there, and you can even make your own. But let's be honest, making your own game engine is going to take you as long as it would take to make a game, if not longer. That would be the ideal, to make your own game engine that you can use for future projects and you have complete control over, but it's out of the reach, out of the scope, if not technically, at least time-wise, for so many people. So you're looking for a game engine that's already ready, it's got a strong community behind it, and that's not going to absolutely fleece you when it comes to pricing options. Well, I'm moving away from Unity and I'm looking at 3 options right now. The first one is Gamemaker Studio 2, the game engine that I made my first game in ever, Glow. And Gamemaker Studio 2 is a fantastic option. The downside, the initial and immediate downsides to Gamemaker Studio 2 is that it probably has the highest pricing out of the 3 options I'm going to talk about today. You can get a free to use version, but you're pretty limited in what you can output. So you're going to have to look at Creator or Indie if you're a small indie company. Creator comes in at a monthly cost of $5 or a yearly cost of $50. And that gives you full access to the engine and lets you create Windows, Mac OS and Linux games. If you want to take things a bit further and make web games or mobile games, then you have to look at the Indie option, which is $10 a month or $100 a year. But if you want to take your games even further and put them out to consoles, then you have to look at the Enterprise option, which is going to cost you $80 a month or $800 a year. Now, when I first started using Gamemaker Studio, it wasn't a subscription-based model. You just paid a price, which was similar to the yearly subscription price of these, and you were done with it. You had it. So I paid around $60 to get the basic license to export desktop games, Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. But now the pricing has changed, and at these subscription models, you need to be damn well certain that Gamemaker Studio 2 is going to do everything you need and is going to be the tool of choice for a long while to come. Now, the benefits to Gamemaker Studio 2 are that it does have a strong community and it's made so many amazing games in the industry. Vlambeer are probably one of the most famous studios to use it and have made some amazing games with Gamemaker Studio. But Gamemaker Studio excels mostly in 2D games. For 2D games, it is absolutely superb. If you forget the pricing model, it's absolutely superb and can create some amazing 2D experiences. Pixel perfect gaming that you need when creating platformers, top-down shooters, etc. And what I personally loved about Gamemaker Studio when I used it was GML, its own coding language that reads a lot like pseudocode. I'm a professional software engineer and I really enjoyed using it. It was easy, not difficult to understand for beginners, and just quite fun to use. On top of that, you can also use visual coding as well. There's a lot of drag and drop options, and to be honest, the whole coding side of Gamemaker Studio is massively simplified and really easy for anybody coming in as a newcomer, anybody who isn't very confident of their coding skills, and overall it's a really enjoyable, fun and great game engine to use. For me, using Gamemaker Studio felt like playing a game. But as we said, the biggest downside to Gamemaker Studio 2 is the pricing. Now, if you are worried about pricing, then Godot is a fantastic option because it's open source and completely free. Now, Godot has been around for quite a while, and it hasn't been the best choice as a game engine. However, with the community supporting it and building up over the years, it has started to develop itself into a really solid choice. One of the best things about Godot is that it is completely free. There is no pricing that you ever have to consider. And secondly, because it's open source, it has such a strong community building around it, and its direction in terms of development should be aligned with the community. If you're completely new to the world of game development, this could be a great option to jump into something that's still kind of growing and at its birth of becoming something amazing, and you could be a part of that community and help its direction. But because Godot is still kind of in its infancy, it still has a lot of scope for improvement. It's not going to be up to scratch for creating some of those higher end 3D games that people might want to make. Especially if you're a small team or solo developer, it could prove quite difficult trying to get out of the game engine exactly what you want. Godot, like Gamemaker Studio, also has its own scripting language called GDScript, which does help simplify things in some respects, but is also quite limited. To solve that issue though, Godot also supports a number of other languages, but again, it can be quite tricky trying to use those languages in Godot. It's not as smooth a fit as you might like. Over time, these things could change and Godot could be the #1 choice. But although it has so many positives and benefits, for me personally, Godot just has a few too many limitations for the scope of the video games I want to make today. Which brings us onto Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine, for me, ticks the boxes in so many areas. It is free for small indie game developers like myself, and it provides the sheer power and grunt that's needed to create any kind of video game experience you want. So many AAA gaming studios use Unreal Engine, and Unreal comes from a company that has a deep history in developing games, not just creating a game engine. To understand the true power of Unreal Engine, some of the best showcase footage when the PS5 was first announcing was created using Unreal Engine 5. But okay, as indie game developers, we're not going to be making game experiences to that level. But the most important aspects to me are that Unreal Engine is free to use at my level. It has a great community around it, with lots of training materials and an asset store for anybody that needs that little extra bit of help. It has the power to create almost any kind of video game experience you want, especially if you're looking towards 3D focused games. If you're looking to make a 2D game, it might be overkill and you might want to look at some of the other options we just talked about. But if you want the option of no limitation, Unreal definitely provides that. But it's not going to be for everyone because there are some downsides. Unreal Engine uses C++, which is a bit of a more difficult language to use than something like C# if you're coming from Unity, and certainly more difficult to use than the scripting languages for Godot and Gamemaker Studio. To use Unreal Engine, you're going to need to have a solid foundation in software engineering. If you don't, it's going to be a really big uphill struggle, or at the very least, you're going to have to make sure that you solidify your understanding of programming. Now, there are visual coding options that are available for Unreal through the asset store, options like Blueprint, which means that it can take most of the coding aspects out of the equation, making it a lot easier for people to come in and use the game engine. So for every negative and issue that Unreal Engine 5 has, it seems to have a solution as well. But there's definitely a bigger world and a huger scope for somebody to learn if they're going into Unreal. I believe if, like myself, you're going from Unity to Unreal, the transition won't be as tricky. But you could still ask, what stops Unreal going down the same path of Unity? What stops Epic Games making decisions like Unity did that are completely against the interests of us as game developers and completely destroy the trust in the business? Well, we can't be certain, but we can be a little bit more confident. And the reason behind that is, as we said earlier, Epic Games have been behind some of the greatest games that we've known. Unreal Engine its name comes from Unreal Tournament, one of the best original first-person shooters ever created. Epic have so many other avenues of income, games like Fortnite and so many other games that they get behind. They've got the Epic Store as well. There's so many different options and different avenues for how Epic make their money. It does reduce the risk of them making some crazy decisions around their game engine. But these are not facts, these are just my opinions, and these are the reasons why I'm going to be making my decision the way I am. I hope that this information can at least help you make your decision whether you go for Gamemaker Studio, Godot, Unreal Engine, or realize that none of those options are for you and look for other ideas. I would love to know what your choices are and what alternatives you think we should look at and consider as game developers. And if you are going to be one of those crazy cats that creates your own game engine, tell us all about it because you guys amaze me. And if you want to find out more about my in-depth thoughts on the whole crazy Unity situation, check out this episode right here.